Greetings from New York City. Welcome to this Passenger Experience Conference webinar. I'm Jennifer Coates-Clay, author of Jetliner Cabins, and I'll be your moderator this morning and afternoon and evening, depending on which part of the world you're in. Our topic for this webinar is responding to disruption, quick fix or profound change. Our distinguished presenter will be Mr. Johannes Lampeler, Director of Design at Design Works, a BMW Group company. This is the third webinar in the Passenger Experience Conference virtual series. These webinars are organized by Gillian Jenner, assisted by Emily Impey and Sarah Harvey. And the series is brought to you by Aircraft Interiors Expo and the World Travel, Catering and Onboard Services Expo. I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to be your moderator on this occasion. I'm sorry we couldn't meet in the usual way at the annual Hamburg event in April of this year, but this series is a splendid way for us all to stay connected until the Hamburg Expo next April. Now, first of all, a message for our audience members. Ladies and gentlemen, please know we welcome your questions. There will be question and answer sessions during the webinar. As part of the webinar, there's a new Jetliner Cabins case study for you to download if you wish, either during or after this event. Below your screen, there's an attachment tab, and you can click on this tab to start the download. My case study is entitled Cabin Health Alerts. There are 8 pages providing details of new COVID-19 sanitation programs. Many thanks to Dr. Jeremy Stone and Mrs. Anita Gittelson for their specialist comments that I've included in this case study. Looking back to last week, 24th of June, I wonder whether you were able to join the webinar moderated by Vern Alg, who is the leading moderator at the Hamburg Expo. The topic, returning to air travel, solving the MRO, modification and retrofit pain points. There were detailed discussions about how to handle new maintenance and cleaning schedules and emerging technologies. We also heard about practical difficulties relating to high-frequency use of commonly available cleaning products. Christian Sutter mentioned that crises create opportunities, and this is a key message for vendors, suppliers, and manufacturers. Now is the time to move ahead with new product concepts. Perhaps you were also able to join the first webinar of this series on 17th of June, moderated by Andrew Doyle. The topic, the outlook for aircraft interiors. The slide presentation from Rob Morris showed metrics for future fleet utilization, recovery scenarios, and traffic forecasts. The key message was that the airline business might take until 2023 to return to the levels recorded in 2019. Gary Weissel stressed the importance of investing in research and development, calling for government-funded support and mandated standards for aircraft hygiene programs. I always listen very carefully to Gary's comments because he did the proofreading for the second edition of Jetliner Cabins. That was a major task. So I think this is the right moment for me to publicly thank Gary for his wonderful input to the book. And I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank the 50 specialists that are quoted in the book, also the eagle-eyed text and picture editors, Marisa Garcia, founder of FlightChic.com, Marianne Simpson, media director at Apex, and in New York City, Sheila Cobb, Bob Camp, and Larry Stockel. Many thanks to all of you. It's time now to move on to our presentation. The focus is on responding to disruption. This year, because of COVID-19, we've all been disrupted at a personal level. And for the airline business, the situation is catastrophic. Quoting from my case study, the United Nations World Tourism Organization is predicting a fall in international travel spending this year of close to $1 trillion. It's estimated that approximately 330 million jobs globally depend on the travel sector. With borders closed, fleets grounded, and mass job cuts, the COVID-19 pandemic has created a spiral of economic misery. How should airlines respond to this violent and disrupted set a level of disruption in this era? Our distinguished presenter for this webinar is Mr. Johannes Lampala. Johannes is Director of Design Works, a BMW Group company. He joined the Los Angeles studio in 2005 as designer, and in 2015, he was appointed Director of Design at Design Works. Johannes leads a multidisciplinary team, and he's headed major design projects for the BMW Group brands, also with BE Aerospace, Singapore Airlines, Alaska Airlines, Delta, Eva Air, Bay Area Rapid Transit, and Hyperloop One. Johannes is going to speak to us about responding to disruption, quick fix or profound change. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now time to welcome Johannes Lampala. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thanks for that wonderful introduction. Hello also from Los Angeles. As Jennifer said, my name is Johannes Lampala, and I will walk you through our presentation today. We will also have questions during the presentation in three different points. So I have created three chapters. We will have a main Q&A at the end, but as I mentioned, we will pause after each chapter also to ask a couple of questions from the audience. When I was in the beginning of the year preparing my presentation for the annual get-together in Hamburg, the topic was how to think like a disruptor, how to use that mindset of being disrupted to fuel innovation. Well, now we don't need to imagine disruption. The airline industry has been disrupted like never before. And now the question instead is, how do we respond? Do we need a quick fix, or are we in the midst of a profound change? I think it is both. I believe we need immediate response to bring back confidence and trust to air travel. How do we best reassure customers? How do we create comfort in feeling safe, cared for, and in control? The challenge of air travel is that passengers are not in control. The airlines are. And therefore, transparency and communication is key. Like communicating status of the flight in terms of cleanliness, incorporating health and wellness information into general updates that you get about your journey. Up to this point, they have been more in the lines of aircraft is being fueled or de-iced. But now we're in a different climate, and the messaging needs to change. The message also can be more specific. It can visualize the actions that the airline is taking to ensure passengers are safe and well taken care for. Just like a maintenance check on your car, a sanitation checklist would give passengers a visual reference of what has been cleaned and sanitized. They could even see almost a visual progression of that cleaning. This can also provide a checklist for the airline to ensure that they are following protocol and taking measures. Serving peanuts and having touchscreens was never a good combination. It's important to allow personal devices to connect to screens and let passengers use their own devices as controllers. This will enhance the experience, but most importantly, you avoid contact. Airlines are definitely taking action, and I have to say the industry has been responding well. Couple examples, Delta has announced Global Cleanliness Division, Etihad has in-flight wellness ambassadors on board as well as at the airport, just to name a couple. There are many others. And also design houses and suppliers are creating temporary product solutions. We have seen the design community really take on their personal interest to address these issues with very creative and innovative solutions. But even with growing confidence, we cannot overlook the long-term opportunity to create a better experience for all. So what do passengers want? What are the main concerns now? We did a small survey, and this is not an extensive study by any means, and serves only as an indicator for potential opportunities. 3 things stood out clearly: proximity, air quality, and cleanliness. Proximity is the main concern, while being seated close to strangers, as well as during boarding and deplaning. We intentionally asked this about the biggest concern, so we did not give the survey participants an option to choose several of these concerns, which we believe all of them are. We just wanted to see what is the main concern. And definitely proximity is the main concern, as the combination of being seated close to somebody as well as boarding and deplaning combines over 70% of the concern. 90% of respondents want new boarding protocols. That's quite clear message. Over 60% wants also new deplaning protocols. And although only 14% note new luggage service would increase confidence to travel, it is highly connected to the boarding and deplaning challenge. If you think about a rollerboard, it's essentially a cargo item. It picks dirt from everywhere. You roll it in the parking garage, on the street, all surfaces in the airport, including bathrooms, and then you bring it on board and lift it above stranger's head to stow it in a bin. This definitely doesn't sound like a good idea. So maybe now, since the bags are connected to a lot of the other issues, we can also start thinking about new solutions, and do we even allow large rollerboards on board in the future? Passengers want less density, especially more distance from passenger next to you. Almost 90% is concerned about being seated right next to someone. It's quite interesting, the difference. You would think that the concern for somebody sitting behind you and maybe sneezing at you would be great as well. But definitely it is the closeness. It is the closeness to someone. And it's interesting if you start looking at this in relation how we design spaces. In the economy plus segments of aircrafts, the extra space is only between rows. it's not more space next to someone. It is only the distance to somebody in front or behind you. And in the past, that has been the key value point, gives you more legroom. But maybe now the values and concerns are changing. However, passengers are not willing to pay the full financial burden for the loss of capacity. You can see that a third of the respondents doesn't want to pay at all. It is the largest column here, but on the other hand, that means that 2/3 would be willing to pay at least 10%, and slightly over 40% would be willing to pay at least 20% extra. Not a full cost to cover the permanent elimination of middle seats, but maybe it should not be all of it on the burden of the passengers. Passengers want reassurance. Half says clean air confirmation would increase their confidence to travel, and 40% for both seat sanitation confirmation as well as common areas sanitation confirmation would increase confidence to travel. So these are clear messages. We want to be reassured. We want transparency. We want communication. Almost half say that staggered seating would increase their confidence to travel. And this is not less density. This is just staggering, which would create more distance or better spacing to the passenger next to you, which we know is a great concern. We also know that there are many innovative economy class seats and layouts of passenger accommodations, but no one has dared to implement them yet. Now is an opportunity for brave CEOs. Maybe in the past there has not been enough reward over the risk, but now the justification and acceptance is there. So that concludes our first part of the presentation. So I welcome at this point a couple of questions, if there is any from the audience.
Thank you, Johannes. You covered a great number of points, and this is a major subject that we're all dealing with. We have to deal with these major topics because of COVID-19 pandemic. Before we move on to the questions, let's just think about the word design. What is it that designers do? They seem to do everything. They pop up everywhere. And design is something that doesn't just affect cities and airports, but also designer cocktails, designer socks and shoes. The dictionary tells us that design is a mental plan. It also says scheme of attack. Did something happen by accident or by design? Was it forced on us? One of the best definitions, I think, is design is the management of change. And certainly, as the singer sang, the times they are a-changing. So we're in the middle of all this ourselves, and we do have some questions coming from our audience members. Please, everyone, remember to send in your questions. This is your opportunity to put your questions before Johannes. We did receive a question from Chris Wood, flying disabled, asking, is this the time when possibly the LOPAs might be changed inside the cabin, and might we see a designated area for passengers with restricted mobility, for example, wheelchair passengers? So, Johannes, that's our first question for you, please, today.
Thank you. I certainly hope so, that we are not only addressing the issue of proximity with having less capacity on board when the commercial flights reassume again. So I think that there is a bigger opportunity for a more major change, and looking at the layout from multiple users' point of view, and not from the typical kind of a three-class construction that we have at the moment.
I see. Now, another question that has come in from members of the audience. What about comparisons with other modes of travel regarding the percentage of risk of catching the virus? And this would imply it's necessary to perform the same study on several different modes of travel, for example, trains, carpooling, delivery services, and so on. What are your thoughts about the relativities, the safety of air travel compared with the other modes of travel, Johannes?
Well, definitely the air travel has its unique challenges. When I was talking about passengers not being in control, I believe in all other public transportation modes, you can make the claim that passengers have more control, because they can choose when to enter and exit the mode of transportation, like in a train or a car. They can choose to open windows, get outside air in. There is a lot of elements in other modes of transportation that also gives at least a perception of safety. And perception is also important because even if we think of now, a lot of us are wearing kind of homemade, self-made face coverings, and they're not bulletproof in no means, but they do give you a sense of comfort, a sense that I am at least containing, if I have the virus, within me, and not spreading it to others. So it is more of a mental picture about safety.
Yes, there's another question that's come from the audience. Passengers often say they'll pay for things when they're filling in their surveys, but they rarely follow through. Do you think that this is going to change now? Will passengers really pay for blocked seats on board? Now, just this past week, we've heard that some airlines are thinking about asking the government to pay for the blocked seats. Will the passengers pay extra? Johannes, what are your thoughts on that topic?
I think when the extra is incremental, that it clearly doesn't cover the whole loss of revenue for those empty seats or blocked seats. I think passengers would be willing to contribute, but definitely not fully. I think where passengers would be more willing to pay the extra is that it's not just blocked seats, but it is a better experience and a better solution based on a new layout, a lesser density environment. We already see that or have seen that in the premium classes, in the business classes. When the lay flat was introduced, there was a question of will the passengers pay the extra? It used much more space than the previous business or first class layouts and proved to be very successful.
Now, Johannes, given your experience working in different parts of the world, do you think there are certain regions where the airlines would move in that direction and open up the layout of passenger accommodation to create more space availability? Is this something that we could associate with Eastern Hemisphere or Western Hemisphere or the North or the South? What are your thoughts on that topic?
I think a distance and distance of routes might play a part rather than cultural preference. Maybe the areas that are used to having relatively long flights wherever they go, like Southeast Asia, for example, lot of long flights. And maybe within Europe, the flights tend to be relatively short, and there is less of a concern to create a new layout. I also wish that there would be just more differentiated options. Maybe this becomes also a greater difference between the airlines, whether they are a low-cost carrier or a premium carrier. If you look at the layout of a main cabin between a low-cost and a premium carrier, it's identical. There is little change or difference in maybe the distance between rows and quality of seats, but inherently it is the same.
Yes, thinking across the modes of transport, a definition of freedom really is the availability of options. When we're all crammed into one aircraft with only one class service, that's a completely different proposition from multi-class cabin layout. And we've heard about ideas for double-decker seats. What are they going to do? Take the overhead bins out, or are they going to lower the floorboards? We've heard about the nests, where we've got these clusters of seats that you sort of climb into head first. All these amazing ideas that are usually on display at the Hamburg Expo will be reconsidered now in this new context, because airlines have got to face the need to change. So we're coming up to the halfway point, and I think that it would be a good idea to move on to the second section of Johannes's presentation. But just before we do that, there is a question from an audience member asking about the use of new materials for seats and galleys and monuments, innovative materials avoiding the virus, antimicrobial, antiviral. What are your thoughts, Johannes, on using advanced materials inside the cabin?
I think it is the future. Materials plays a huge part in any innovative design. They often are the catalyst and the enabler of innovation. And because of the situation we're in, a situation that we also cannot look at just happening now and not in the future with a different form of a virus. I believe the development of innovative antimicrobial materials will continue and will eventually become a norm.
Now, there's another question about HEPA filters and air circulation. Just Monday of this week, the governor of New York State, Andrew Cuomo, declared that they were thinking about requiring restaurants and indoor dining facilities to prove that they were installing HEPA filters. Did he mention airlines or aircraft? No. But airlines have been flying HEPA filters since the 1990s. And so here we have air travel leading the way, but air travel has kept very quiet on this subject. There's a need now to speak out on these topics. Johannes, do you have any guidance on air filters and the situation with air circulation inside the cabin?
Next to proximity, air quality was the number 2 concern in our survey. And as I mentioned, communication is key. And I believe airlines are doing things like you, Jennifer, mentioned, being introduced HEPA filters long before any of these crises were known. So I think it is also just the transparency of things that they are doing that reassures people on board.
Yes. Now, let's move on, Johannes, to the second section of your presentation. And thank you, members of the audience, for your questions. Please keep sending them in, because we will have, I think, a bit of time nearer the end of this webinar for your questions.
Very good. So let's move on now, looking a little bit more about the automotive industry and what can we learn from there. This sketch here could be of a first-class suite. It could even be a premium business class seat, the way those spaces have developed. Maybe even a luxury compartment in a train. But it is a sketch for i3 urban suite concept. So the learning or influence is circular between automotive and aviation. It's not really that one is leading the other. Your experience something in one, and then you want it in another one. So this circular movement will influence and raise the expectations of passengers for both. The automotive and digital worlds are moving towards each other at a fast pace. Technology enablement is leading the disruption of old business models and growth of new markets. This also brings new competitors like Uber and Google. The challenge BMW and other car manufacturers have is that they can either be transformed into a hardware supplier or be part of the solution and shape the transformation. There are four main themes or disruptions at play, known as ACEs. Autonomous, which creates a whole new set of challenges and opportunities. From a design point of view, lots of opportunities. Connected, a whole suite of opportunities to connect vehicles and users. Electrified, which brought new need to create charging infrastructure and also to communicate range to ease anxiety of running out of power. And service, on-demand mobility and new ownership models. So many disruptions happening at the same time. And it's important to address these disruptions through the lens of design. Because through design, we can make these disruptions into premium experiences. Future vehicles will be intelligent enough to think and act on their own. But can they be smart enough to understand people? For 2020 CES, we created a vision for future premium on-demand mobility. An autonomous vehicle that could interact and communicate with passengers in a genuinely intuitive way. Inspiration and philosophy for the concept was this notion of a monolith that reflects its surroundings and also serves as a portal to enter into it. We created a very deliberate contrast between the exterior and the interior. The exterior reflects more the architectural context of the urban environment, and the interior is very inviting with rich colors, highly sensorial materials, and embedded intelligence for ultimate experience. When you see the vehicle arrive from the street side, you see the monolith exterior facade with a smart glass exterior giving a glimpse of the interior space. And when you see the vehicle on the passenger side, on the curb side, the vehicle recognizes the user. And through an intelligent personal assistant, it guides you in through dynamic lighting, first on the floor and then onto the seat. We want to give passengers the freedom and the ability to be in control. The focal point of this interior is a large P-HUD, a panorama head-up display, positioned directly in front of the seating area. And passengers can choose between 3 experience modes, altering the interior and transforming the windshield into an augmented reality interface or sealing off the outside world with a smart glass sidewalls to provide entertainment, privacy, or relaxation. As I mentioned, there is 3 experience modes: to explore, to entertain, or to ease, to relax. No buttons, no screens. The vehicle anticipates your needs. Information comes to you, and interacting is intuitive and natural. Immerse and entertain. Ambient sound and lighting enhances the experience. It becomes immersive. Rest and relax in a 0G position. It is important to bridge the gap between artificial and natural intelligence. Embed technology. Tech appears only when you need it. So lean back, immerse yourself, and interact with the world. So that is BMW I Interaction Ease concept. And here just showing some of the key technologies and features that created this immersive experience. So what can we take away from the automotive space is that to start from the experience is important. Technology is one thing, but technology is an enabler for experiences. And another aspect of disruption is focus. It's easy to get confused with multiple disruptions and not know where to focus. So it's important to know who you are as a company, as an airline, and stick to your core. So that now concludes our next segment. So we'll pause again for some questions and hopefully I can answer them.
Thank you. Thank you, Johannes. And yes, we are receiving more questions from audience members. And I thought that before we start on those questions, you might like to have a little bit of background information. Johannes told me that he originally comes from the Arctic Circle. Now, not many people can say that. Johannes comes from North Finland, and then he moved to Milan, Italy, for his studies. And within the Arctic Circle, it's true, there are not many airports, but it is a busy airspace. Just think about all those polar route scheduled air services. And it was Finnair, historical note, Finnair pioneered the non-stop Helsinki to Tokyo route across the Arctic Ocean. And that was in the mid-1980s with a DC-10 aircraft. That was a historical advance in navigation terms in aviation history. So we can move on now to some other questions. And one that came in was saying, is there something beyond HEPA filters? Well, in the Cabin Health Alerts here, the case study, I'm quoting Dr. Stone when he says that the HEPA filters have a microbial removal efficiency of greater than 99.999% with bacteria and viruses. This is the point that Governor Andrew Cuomo was talking about earlier this week. At the same time, Dr. Stone says this is very helpful, but cannot completely remove all viral particles from a sealed cabin. Governor Cuomo wants everybody to be having their lunches and dinners in the open air. That's apparently much better and a better way to cope with the problems from the virus. However, the main point that relates to the question that came in, fellow passengers coughing and sneezing. We all know about that. It happens all the time. And so we have seen from Avio Interiors, Factory Design, other organizations, many proposals for shields between the seats and head boxes, and certain passengers arrive wearing hoods and face masks. All these ways will have to be explored, and it'll become the new normal to think about how to fly. Now, the question for you, Johannes, with the possibility of a new seating layout, with the possibility of partitions or the reverse middle seat, that was another proposal that was put forward. Those double-decker stretch-out seats, a bit like the old Pullman trains or the old Stratocruiser or Stratoliner aircraft, where you would lower the overhead baggage bin and lo and behold, there was a stretch-out seat and you could get up there and stretch out. What about the time taken for certification of these brave new ideas? How long do you think it's going to take for aviation to move ahead now that we are obliged to deal with new ideas?
That's a very difficult question to answer, especially from coming from a designer. Typically, the aviation industry is very slow to react to change because of the long development timelines and the testing requirements and the enormous costs related to both. So it is definitely difficult to anticipate how quickly. But I also feel that this kind of a transition period should be a period of testing and exploring what options passengers really value. I think we can speed up certification of these temporary solutions, these plugins that can be implemented into the existing seat structures, into the middle seat, changing headrests with more, shielding to the sides. We will also see a lot of kind of accessories, personal devices that people will bring on board, and it will be interesting to see which one of these will stick. I'm definitely interested in the quick recovery, and I believe that starts from the communication and addressing the issues, starting with less capacity on board. And if there's less capacity on board, let's then take advantage of creative solutions for those empty seats. And that maybe starts building a new experience, a new opportunity maybe not in the immediate future, but in the near future. In the timelines of, let's say that there is an airline that is placing an order for aircraft to be delivered in 3 3 years, maybe it is time to consider what that aircraft would look like.
Yes. Now, another question has come in about UV lighting as a way to clean the aircraft interior. And I do recall in one of the earlier webinars that the specialists were extremely concerned about these new technologies, saying, yes, if these lighting systems or electrostatic fogging and spraying machines are used over and over again, are we talking about every single turnaround of the aircraft? Are we talking about the overnights? Are we talking about every 6 hours? That potentially there could be terrible damage to the surface fabrics, the finishes, even possibly the electrical equipment inside the aircraft. And so one of the questions that's coming up is how to tackle this deep cleaning. Johannes, do you have any comments on this issue? Here in New York City, they've been cleaning the subway carriages every night instead of every 3 nights. And definitely we can see an improvement. The subway carriages are definitely cleaner than they used to be. However, with aircraft turnarounds, and Southwest pioneered a turnaround of 20 minutes, 25 minutes for the 737s. I do remember when we first heard about that, it was quite amazing. Our turnarounds had always been lengthier. How will airlines cope with this new requirement for sanitation levels, UV lighting or electrostatic spraying or whatever? We've also heard about Germ Falcon, a device that can go along the aisle of the aircraft. This is described in detail with pictures in the case study that I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar. What are your thoughts, Johannes, on the cleaning schedules that will come up in the future?
I think it all depends on testing of the efficacy of that the cleaning, and I believe there is going to be multiple layers to the sanitization or cleaning procedure, where there can be a more of a heavy sterilization that it's done once a day, for example, and then there is a more of a detailed lighter cleaning that happens then between flights of certain areas, but it all comes down to passenger safety. And we need to be considerate also about are the cleaning supplies and the surfaces and the air then healthy for the passengers after this heavy cleaning. Part of that material question and the antimicrobial development of new materials is also the development of durable materials that can withstand the right cleaning. But first we need to know and test what that right cleaning is so that the materials can be designed to withstand that.
Yes. One other point that Dr. Stone made, and this is quoted in the case study, is that for feelings of total confidence, we're all waiting for a vaccine, and this will relieve the pressure on air travel. And the other point he made was a safe to inhale disinfectant. And there are developments which he describes in the case study. This is not something from outer space. I recently spoke with a dermatologist and some other medical people, and they say, yes, they use hypochlorous acid, and that disinfects, for example, the inside of the nose of a patient who's going to have a surgical procedure. So there's a world out there that is only only just starting to open up for us in the air travel business. And we will need to hear from the scientists and the regulatory authorities and the focus groups. For the first time, designers and marketers will be working alongside aviation doctors and the airline medical department. So it's a new world that's opening for us, but it's moving at a great pace. So I think now, Johannes, could we move on to your chapter 3, please? We're all ready for this section. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. So in this last section, I wanted to lay out a hypothetical brief. How would a hypothetical brief for designing a better onboard experience look like? And obviously, let's start from the experience. So the first ask would be to reimagine the layout. Develop a new main cabin LOPA to facilitate more efficient boarding and deplaning, better ingress and egress to seats, more privacy and separation between passengers next to each other, potentially more separation between rows or more zoning. We think there should be a couple developments, an option with current density and also a 20 to 30% reduced density with clear value proposition. We learned from the survey that passengers are not willing to cover the cost or all of the cost of lost density, but we do think that to create a meaningful new opportunity, 20 to 30% would be an interesting space to see some value propositions. Reclass the classes. Now that you have improved the main cabin, think about upgrades to the experience based on activities. Consider who is it targeting and how much more footprint is given to justify the space cost ratio. Here just 3 potential storylines. We welcome more. Family zone, be more productive, get more rest. So if we think about the class structure today, the business class in a narrow-body aircraft gives you a little bit more of everything. Gives you a wider seat, more leg room, wider armrests, more cushier seat bottom, a little bit better service, food, drink, everything. But does passengers want all of those aspects, or do they just want one? For example, productivity. If you want to be more productive, that probably means that you need to do some work while on board. So you need a good work surface to place your laptop and not to have the seat in front of you recline into your laptop. You probably don't need that much more recline or lay flat space because your intent is to be productive. On the other hand, if you want to get more rest, if you plan to go on a flight and say, oh, I'm just gonna go and completely shut eye, ignore the service, everything. So therefore, how would that space look? Could that be a little bit more longer pitch, focus on recline, and maybe not so much on the width of the space? Family zone. Airlines probably has good information about how many families and what sizes travels on average per plane. Why don't we create dedicated family zones that are booked as a group by the families and kept open all the way until the end, and then other passengers can book them as well. This can also create other opportunities of packaging tickets and services. It is also a question about the layout. Where would these different zones be? If we're concerned about boarding and families with small children has a pre-boarding, maybe the family zone should be in the back of the plane. Consider the passenger needs. Passengers are bringing more personal items on board. Design the space for ease of stowage and access during flight for shoulder bag or purse, large water bottles, several personal electronic devices, and personal food items. We did not address the food in our survey results, but we did ask that question. Only quarter was comfortable with the food service as it is, and another quarter was uncomfortable. Half of the respondents was okay in certain conditions. So that means that we will probably bring more personal food items on board in the future. We've already seen water bottles getting larger and larger, and people bringing a lot of portable electronic devices on board. So creating spaces for these. Shoulder bag or purse, where do you put it? In the current climate, maybe you're less comfortable placing it on the floor, as that's currently kind of the only space where you can place it. Seamless digital experience. Think beyond seatback screens and entertainment. Envision how a digital layer enhances your whole onboard experience. Again, go back to the previous and think about the functions. Think about the activities, and then look at, is this activity enhanced by a digital component? Is there something more to it than the entertainment aspect in the seatback? And also, where are these digital interactions placed? Designed for wellness. Develop a visual design language of clean and healthy. Apply easy to clean, seamless surfacing where possible, and introduce innovative wellness features. Use antimicrobial materials or surfaces that can withstand sterilization. Wellness was a topic even before COVID-19. It's going to continue to be a big topic. And the health aspect of these spaces can also be resolved through design ideas. Last but not least, have fun with the brand. Even though COVID-19 is in our minds right now, we cannot design just for this. We still need to consider and elevate other aspects of the experience and to create uplifting environments and memorable experiences. Environments that are enjoyable to be in and experiences that are differentiated to give consumers choices. We feel that the airlines and the brands have become quite similar, and consumers, especially in the narrow body market, don't have that many choices. Maybe there is time with these new ideas for layouts and experiences to also create more choices. So enjoy creating these designs, and we at DesignWorks welcome any airline to come forward, and we look forward to working with you on this brief. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Johannes. You've given us a great deal to think about today, and let's look forward to the improvements that we will be able to enact as we handle the problems that are creating so much stress and strain right now. We've had another question about accessibility, and I think that Johannes did cover that earlier when he was talking about rezoning within the aircraft cabin, just as there might be zones for families or for business groups travelling together or sports groups travelling together. Let's hope that there will be a designated area for passengers with reduced mobility. So we're nearing the end of our timing for this session, and I'd like to say thank you to all those who've participated. I know that everyone really enjoyed hearing those points, Johannes, that you described so clearly for us. Each slide, in a way, raises another set of questions. And so I hope that we'll be able to return to some of these topics at a future date. Let's all look forward to meeting up at the Hamburg Expo in April next year. But this month, please don't forget to join next week's webinar, Wednesday, 8th of July, 3 p.m. London time. The topic, Innovation in a Post-Coronavirus World. Just what we need, more creative solutions to the current problems. And finally, my thanks to the organisers for their very kind invitation to be your moderator for this webinar. I hope that you, ladies and gentlemen of the audience, have felt that you are in good company. For me, the occasion has been a privilege and a great pleasure. So goodbye, everyone, and stay safe. And thank you for joining this Passenger Experience Conference webinar. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.